What happens when a beloved actor finds himself trapped in an interview that spirals completely out of control? When the questions become too personal, too invasive, and crossed lines that should never be crossed. Today, we're diving into one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history, when Josh Holloway, the charismatic star who captured hearts as Sawyer on Lost, walked off Kelly Clarkson's show in the middle of a live taping. This wasn't just a simple disagreement or a misunderstanding. This was a full-blown confrontation that left the audience stunned, the production team scrambling, and both host and guest in a heated exchange that nobody saw coming. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you're about to hear will change how you see celebrity interviews forever. The Kelly Clarkson Show had been riding high on positive reviews and strong ratings. Kelly's warm, approachable style had made her a favorite among both celebrities and viewers. Her interviews were known for being comfortable, fun, and refreshingly genuine in a world of scripted talk show appearances. So when Josh Holloway was booked as a guest to promote his latest project, everyone expected another one of those easy, breezy conversations that Kelly had become famous for. Josh walked onto the set with his trademark confident swagger, flashing that famous smile that had made him a fan favorite for years. The audience erupted in applause as he made his way to the guest chair, waving and clearly in good spirits. Kelly greeted him with her usual enthusiasm, and the first few minutes played out exactly as everyone expected. "Josh Holloway, everybody," Kelly announced with genuine excitement in her voice. "I have to tell you, I was such a huge Lost fan, and Sawyer was he was everything. That character was so complex and you brought so much depth to him." Josh leaned back in his chair, clearly comfortable and ready to dive into the usual promotional talking points. "Thank you, Kelly. That means a lot coming from you. Sawyer was definitely a character that challenged me as an actor. You know, he had all these layers, all this pain underneath that tough guy exterior." "Absolutely," Kelly nodded, her energy infectious as always. "And now you're taking on this completely different role in your new series. Tell us about that transition, because it's such a departure from what we've seen you do before." For the next several minutes, the conversation flowed smoothly. Josh talked about his preparation for the new role, shared some behind-the-scenes stories, and even cracked a few jokes that had the audience laughing. Kelly was in her element, asking thoughtful questions and creating the kind of atmosphere that put her guests at ease. Everything seemed to be going perfectly according to plan, but then something shifted in Kelly's demeanor. There was a slight pause, a moment where she seemed to be considering her next words carefully. The producers had clearly given her some talking points, some angles to explore that would generate more buzz, more social media clips, more of the kind of content that drives engagement in today's media landscape. "Josh," Kelly said, her tone becoming more serious, more probing, "I want to ask you about something that I think a lot of people are curious about. Your personal life has been pretty private over the years, which I really respect, but there have been some rumors, some speculation about your marriage, about some challenges you and your wife have been facing." The change in Josh's expression was immediate and unmistakable. The easy smile faded, his posture stiffened, and there was a flash of something, surprise, annoyance, maybe even anger, that crossed his face. This wasn't the territory he had expected to venture into, and it certainly wasn't what had been discussed with his publicist when they agreed to the appearance. "Kelly," Josh said, his voice taking on a more measured tone, "I appreciate your interest, but my family and my marriage, that's not really something I discuss in interviews. I'm here to talk about my work, about the show, about the craft of acting." But Kelly didn't seem ready to let it go. Perhaps emboldened by the reaction she was getting, perhaps pushed by producers who saw an opportunity for a viral moment, she pressed forward with a line of questioning that was about to turn this friendly chat into something much more volatile. "I understand that," Kelly replied, "but you've built your career on playing these really authentic, emotionally complex characters. Don't you think your fans deserve to know the real person behind those performances? Don't they deserve to understand what drives that authenticity?" Josh's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My fans deserve good performances and honest work. They don't deserve access to my private life, to my family's private moments. There's a difference between being authentic as an actor and being an open book as a person." The tension in the studio was starting to become palpable. What had started as a routine promotional interview was beginning to feel like an interrogation, and Josh was clearly not comfortable with the direction things were heading. But Kelly, perhaps sensing that she was on the verge of creating the kind of television moment that generates headlines, decided to push even further. "But Josh, there are reports, sources close to you who say that you and your wife have been living separately, that there have been some real struggles. As someone who's been through a very public divorce myself, I know how isolating it can feel to keep everything bottled up. Sometimes talking about it can actually help." The silence that followed was deafening. Josh stared at Kelly for what felt like an eternity, his face cycling through emotions, shock, disbelief, and growing anger. The audience, sensing that something was very wrong, had gone completely quiet. Even the cameras seemed to zoom in instinctively, capturing every micro-expression on Josh's face as he processed what had just happened. "Kelly," Josh said finally, his voice low and controlled, but with an edge that cut through the studio air like a knife. "I don't know where you're getting your information, but you're completely out of line here. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what was discussed." Kelly's face flushed slightly as she realized the interview was slipping away from her control. But rather than course-correcting, she made the decision that would ultimately define this entire encounter. She leaned forward in her chair, adopting the kind of concerned expression that might work with a close friend but felt manipulative in this context. "Josh, I think you're misunderstanding my intentions here. I've been through my own very public struggles, my own divorce, my own challenges, with relationships in the spotlight. I know how hard it is to maintain a marriage when you're constantly traveling, constantly working, constantly under scrutiny. I'm not trying to exploit you, I'm trying to help you." Josh's laugh was sharp and bitter, completely devoid of humor. "Help me, Kelly. You think you're helping me by repeating tabloid rumors on national television. You think you're helping me by putting words in my mouth about my marriage. You think you're helping by making my wife and kids targets for speculation and gossip. That's not what I'm doing," Kelly protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm asking questions that any good interviewer would ask. I'm trying to give you a platform to set the record straight, to tell your side of the story." "My side of what story?" Josh's voice was getting louder now, his famous composure finally starting to crack. "The story that exists only in gossip, columns, and anonymous sources. The story that you're choosing to legitimize by bringing it up on your show. Kelly, there is no story. There's just my life, my family's life, and our right to privacy." The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation unfold with the kind of fascination that comes from witnessing something that clearly wasn't supposed to happen. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every word, every expression, every moment of this rapidly deteriorating situation. Kelly seemed to sense that she was losing the narrative, losing control of her own show, and she made another critical error in judgment. Instead of apologizing and moving on, she decided to justify her approach by appealing to a higher purpose. "Josh, I understand you're upset, but this is exactly the kind of honest conversation that people need to hear. Mental health, relationship struggles, the pressure of fame, these are real issues that affect real people. By talking about them openly, we help normalize these conversations. We help other people who might be going through similar struggles feel less alone." Josh stood up abruptly, his chair sliding back with enough force that it made a scraping sound that echoed through the suddenly quiet studio. "Don't you dare," he said, pointing a finger directly at Kelly. "Don't you dare try to turn your invasion of my privacy into some kind of public service announcement. Don't you dare try to make yourself the hero of this story by claiming you're helping people when what you're really doing is exploiting private pain for television ratings." "Josh, please sit down," Kelly said, her voice taking on a slightly desperate quality. "Let's talk about this. Let's have a real conversation about the pressures that actors face, about the challenges of maintaining relationships in this industry." "No," Josh said firmly, his voice cutting through her attempts to regain control. "We're not going to talk about anything. This interview is over. I came here in good faith to talk about my work, to promote a project I believe in, to connect with fans who appreciate what I do professionally. I did not come here to be psychoanalyzed by someone who thinks she knows my life better than I do." Kelly's producer was frantically gesturing from off-camera, probably trying to signal her to back down, to apologize, to somehow salvage what was rapidly becoming a public relations nightmare for everyone involved. But Kelly seemed determined to justify her position, to make Josh see that her intentions were pure, even if her methods were questionable. "Josh, I really think you're overreacting here," Kelly said, and those words hung in the air like a match, dropped into gasoline. "I'm not attacking you. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about the human experience, about the things that connect us all." "Overreacting," Josh repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. "Kelly, you just ambushed me with personal questions that have no basis in fact, questions that were never discussed or approved beforehand, questions that involve my wife and children. You just tried to turn my marriage into content for your show, and when I object to that, you tell me I'm overreacting." The confrontation had reached a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. This wasn't just about interview questions anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries, about the difference between public figures and private people. Josh was making a stand, not just for himself, but for every celebrity who had ever felt ambushed by questions they never agreed to answer. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Kelly tried again, but her voice was shaky now, uncertain. "Maybe we should take a break. Maybe we should start over." "There's no misunderstanding," Josh replied, his voice deadly calm now, which somehow felt more ominous than when he had been shouting. "You understand exactly what you did. You made a choice to prioritize sensationalism over respect, to prioritize ratings over basic human decency. And now you're trying to gaslight me into thinking that I'm the problem for not going along with it. The word gaslight seemed to hit Kelly like a physical blow. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to respond, but no words came out. The accusation was serious, and in the current cultural climate, it carried weight that extended far beyond this single interview. Josh began walking toward the edge of the... Those words hit the studio like a thunderclap. The suggestion that Josh couldn't handle interviews, that he was somehow weak or unprofessional for defending his privacy, was the final straw that broke whatever restraint he had left. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, and then something colder, more resolute. "Can't handle interviews," Josh said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. "Kelly, I've been doing interviews for over 2 decades. I've sat through questions about my acting, my career choices, my artistic process, my upcoming projects. I've been professional. I've been gracious. I've given thoughtful answers to thoughtful questions. What I won't do is sit here and let you turn my personal life into your entertainment." Kelly seemed to realize she had made a critical error, but instead of backing down, she made the mistake of trying to defend her position even more aggressively. "Josh, this is how interviews work in this business. People want to know about the whole person, not just the character you're playing. If you want to be a public figure, if you want people to watch your shows and movies, then you have to accept that there's going to be interest in your personal life." "Interest, yes," Josh replied, his voice steady, but filled with barely contained fury. "Invasion, no. There's a difference between interest and entitlement, Kelly. There's a difference between curiosity and exploitation. And right now, you're on the wrong side of that line." The audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't the kind of manufactured drama that sometimes happens on talk shows for publicity. This was real, raw, and uncomfortable in a way that made everyone in the room feel like they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. Kelly's next words would prove to be the ones that sealed the fate of this interview. "Josh, I really think you need to consider that your reaction here is pretty extreme. We're just having a conversation. If there's nothing to hide, if your marriage is fine, then why are you getting so defensive about simple questions?" The implication was clear, and it hit Josh like a slap across the face. Kelly was essentially suggesting that his refusal to discuss his personal life was evidence that the rumors might be true, that his anger was proof of guilt rather than a legitimate response to boundary crossing. Josh stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been all interview, but somehow more powerful. "Did you just suggest that my refusal to discuss my private life on your show is evidence that there's something wrong with my private life? Did you really just try to manipulate me into giving you personal information by implying that staying quiet makes me look guilty?" Kelly's face went pale as she realized exactly what she had done. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly, but the damage was already done. "No, Kelly, that's exactly what you meant," Josh continued, his voice gaining strength. "That's the oldest trick in the tabloid playbook. Ask invasive questions, and when someone refuses to answer, suggest that their refusal is suspicious. Create a lose-lose situation where either I violate my own boundaries and give you personal information, or I look like I'm hiding something by maintaining my privacy." The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras, the slight buzz of the studio lights. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. This had gone far beyond a simple disagreement about interview boundaries. This was now a fundamental clash about respect, manipulation, and the ethics of celebrity journalism. "Josh, I really think we should take a step back here," Kelly said, her voice now showing signs of panic. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we should start this part of the conversation over." "Start over?" Josh laughed, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. "Kelly, you can't unsay what you just said. You can't undo the implication you just made. You can't take back the fact that you just tried to manipulate me on national television using the exact same tactics that tabloid reporters use to manufacture stories out of nothing." Kelly was clearly struggling now, caught between doubling down on her position and trying to salvage what was left of the interview. "I'm not a tabloid reporter, Josh. I'm someone who's been through similar struggles, someone who understands the pressure of being in the public eye. I thought maybe you'd appreciate talking to someone who gets it." "Gets what exactly?" Josh demanded. "Gets what it's like to have your privacy invaded. Gets what it's like to have people speculate about your marriage based on nothing but gossip. Because if that's what you get, then why are you doing exactly the same thing to me right now?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Kelly seemed to finally understand that she had painted herself into a corner. Every attempt to justify her line of questioning was only making things worse, only highlighting the contradictions in her approach. "I'm trying to create authentic content," Kelly said, but even she seemed to know how weak that sounded. "I'm trying to have real conversations with real people about real issues. Authentic content, Josh, please," Kelly said, her voice taking on a pleading quality that was painful to watch. "I know I handled this wrong. I know I pushed too hard. But walking away right now, that's going to create an even bigger story than anything we've talked about here, that's going to generate exactly the kind of speculation and gossip that you're trying to avoid. Josh stopped walking and turned to face her one final time, and the look on his face was something that everyone in that studio would remember for years to come. It wasn't anger anymore, it wasn't frustration, it was something much more devastating. It was disappointment mixed with a kind of weary resignation. "Kelly," he said, his voice now completely calm, completely controlled, "you just threatened me. You just told me that if I exercise my right to leave this interview, you'll make sure it becomes an even bigger story. You're essentially holding me hostage here, telling me that my only choice is to sit here and take whatever questions you want to throw at me, or face the consequences of walking away." Kelly's eyes widened as she realized what she had just said, how it had sounded, how it could be interpreted. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "I wasn't threatening you. I was just pointing out the reality of the situation." "The reality," Josh repeated slowly, "is that you've created a situation where I have to choose between my dignity and your convenience. The reality is that you've turned what should have been a professional interaction into a personal attack, disguised as journalism, and the reality is that I don't have to accept either choice you're offering me." Josh began walking again, but this time he paused to address the audience directly, something that almost never happens during the middle of a talk show interview. "I want to apologize to everyone who came here expecting a fun, entertaining interview," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the studio. "You deserved better than this. You deserved a conversation about storytelling, about craft, about the projects that bring us all together. Instead, you got to watch someone try to turn my family into a tabloid story." The audience didn't know how to respond. Some people started to applaud tentatively, but others remained silent, still processing what they were witnessing. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this unprecedented moment. Kelly made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "Josh, I really think if we just sit down and talk this through, we can find a way to finish this interview. That works for both of us. I never intended to make you uncomfortable, and if I did, I sincerely apologize." Josh paused at the edge of the stage and looked back at her with something that might have been pity. "Kelly, an apology that comes with conditions isn't really an apology. An apology that's designed to get me to sit back down and continue this interview isn't really an apology. It's just another manipulation tactic." "That's not fair," Kelly said, her voice breaking slightly. "I am genuinely sorry if I overstepped. I'm genuinely sorry if I made you feel ambushed or attacked. But Josh, this is live television. We have an audience, we have commitments, we have people who tuned in specifically to see you. And those people," Josh replied, "deserve to see someone who respects boundaries, someone who understands the difference between entertainment and exploitation. They deserve to see what it looks like when someone stands up for their principles instead of just going along with whatever gets the best ratings." With that, Josh Holloway walked off the Kelly Clarkson Show stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a panicked production team, and a host who was suddenly alone on camera, with no idea how to handle what had just happened. Kelly sat in her chair for several long seconds, the studio completely silent except for the ambient noise of cameras and equipment. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky, uncertain, completely different from the confident tone she had maintained throughout most of the confrontation. "Well," she said, trying to inject some normalcy back into the situation, "I think we'll take a quick break and be right back with some music." But even as she spoke those words, everyone in the studio knew that there was no coming back from what had just happened. This wasn't the kind of moment that could be smoothed over with a commercial break and a musical performance. This was the kind of moment that would be analyzed, discussed, and debated for months to come. The cameras finally stopped rolling, and the audience was left to process what they had just witnessed. Some people were still sitting in stunned silence. Others were whispering to each other, trying to make sense of what had just unfolded. The energy in the room had completely shifted from the excitement and anticipation that had marked the beginning of the interview, to something much more somber and uncomfortable. Josh had made his point in the most dramatic way possible. He had shown that there are lines that shouldn't be crossed, boundaries that should be respected, and principles that are worth defending, even when it means walking away from a high-profile opportunity. But he had also created a moment that would follow both him and Kelly for the rest of their careers. A moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and referenced whenever discussions about celebrity privacy and interview ethics came up. Kelly remained on stage, but she was clearly shaken. The confident, warm host that audiences had come to love was gone, replaced by someone who looked vulnerable, uncertain, and deeply uncomfortable with what had just transpired. She had gambled on creating a memorable television moment, and she had succeeded, but not in the way she had intended. The aftermath of this confrontation would ripple through the entertainment industry, sparking conversations about the responsibilities of talk show hosts, the rights of guests, and the ethics of entertainment journalism. But in that moment, in that studio, there was only silence. shock, and the recognition that everyone had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. So what do you think about Josh Holloway's decision to walk off the show? Was he right to defend his privacy so forcefully, or should celebrities expect more invasive questions when they agree to do interviews? Subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments below what you would have done in his situation.